The rain in Sector 4 did not wash things clean. It only made the grime slicker, turning the neon-drenched streets into mirrors that reflected the moral decay of the megacity. Jace stood at the window of his apartment on the 114th floor, pressing his forehead against the cold, reinforced glass. Below him, the city of New Elysium sprawled like a circuit board infected with a virus. Rivers of holographic advertisements flowed between the megatowers, selling everything from synthetic dopamine to memory wipes. He had not slept in 3 days. When he closed his eyes, he saw the fire over the Tannhauser Ridge. He heard the screams of his squad mates, the ones he had failed to pull out of the dropship before the plasma rounds hit. He felt the phantom heat on his skin, even though the room was kept at a clinically cool 65 degrees. He turned away from the window, his movement stiff, his left leg. A high-grade biomechanical replacement whirred softly. It was a souvenir from the war, paid for by the same government that had forgotten he existed the moment the peace treaty was signed. His apartment was a box of gray metal and shadows. Empty ration packs littered the counter. A single chair sat in the center of the room, facing a blank wall. This was the life of a hero. A chime sounded from his datapad. It was a reminder for his appointment with Dr. Eris. He grabbed his jacket, a worn leather bomber with the unit patches ripped off, and headed for the door. He needed to walk. If he stayed in this box any longer, the walls would start closing in. Dr. Eris was a hologram, but she had a soothing voice programmed to mimic a maternal figure from the mid-21st century. Her projection flickered in the corner of the community center room where the veterans group met. Jace sat in the back, arms crossed, staring at the floor. "You seem agitated today." "Jace?" Dr. Eris said. Her sensors were likely picking up his elevated heart rate and the cortisol spiking in his blood. "I am fine," Jace grunted. "Sleep deprivation is a serious issue," she continued. "We have discussed the benefits of companionship. Isolation exacerbates your condition. I am not getting a roommate. Doc, I do not like people. I am not suggesting a human," she said. "Studies show that veterans with PTSD respond remarkably well to companion animals. A small bioengineered pet could provide a grounding presence. Something to care for. Something that needs you." Jace laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "A pet? You want me to get a dog? In this city? A dog would choke on the smog in a week. There are hardy breeds," she insisted. "Synthetic hybrids. Lizards, engineered felines. It would help anchor you to the present moment." "I am anchored enough," Jace muttered, rubbing the scar that ran from his jaw to his ear. But later, as he walked out into the humid, crowded streets, the idea stuck in his mind like a splinter. Something to care for. Something that did not know about the war. About the things he had done in the dark to keep the lights on for ungrateful civilians. He found himself wandering toward the lower districts, down where the law was just a suggestion, and the neon lights buzzed with the sound of dying flies. The shop was called the Menagerie. It was wedged between a noodle bar that smelled of burnt garlic and a black market cybernetics clinic. The windows were obscured by steam and shifting holographic displays of exotic beasts. 6-legged panthers, birds with feathers made of fiber optics, and snakes that glowed in time with music. Jace pushed through the plastic strip curtains at the entrance. The air inside was thick and humid, smelling of ozone, wet fur, and unfamiliar musk. Cages lined the walls from floor to ceiling. A robotic parrot squawked at him from a perch, its eyes camera lenses zooming in and out. In a tank to his left, a lizard the size of a small dog changed color to match Jace's jacket. "Can I help you find something, friend?" The shopkeeper emerged from the shadows of the back counter. He was a thin man with greasy skin and a cybernetic eye that whirled independently of his organic one. He wore a stained apron and smelled of antiseptic and old blood. "Just looking," Jace said, keeping his hands in his pockets. "We have the finest stock in the sector," the man said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Bioengineered for loyalty, low maintenance. Perfect for a man who looks like he values his privacy." Jace looked at the man. The shopkeeper's name tag read Rask. "I need something quiet," Jace said. "Something that does not need to be walked 3 times a day." Rask grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. "I have just the thing. A shipment came in this morning. Very high-end, very exclusive. Follow me." Jace hesitated, his combat instincts flaring. The back of the shop was dark, and the air felt heavier there. But he nodded. He was an armed veteran in a pet shop. What was the worst that could happen? Rask led him through a narrow corridor lined with larger, darker cages. The sounds of the front room faded, replaced by a low, electrical hum. "Some clients," Rask said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "prefer more sophisticated pets, creatures with a bit more understanding." He stopped in front of a heavy blast door at the end of the hall. He punched a code into the keypad, and the door hissed open. Jace stepped inside. The room was cold, refrigerated to near freezing. In the center of the room stood a single large cage reinforced with energy shielding. Jace looked inside, expecting a tiger or perhaps a rare alien predator. Instead, he froze. Inside the cage, huddled in the corner on a pile of dirty straw, was a girl. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin was a pale iridescent violet, marked with faint bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with a weak, rhythmic light. She was thin, her ribs showing through the tattered rags she wore. A heavy metal collar was clamped around her slender neck, blinking with a red status light. Her ankles were shackled to the floor. She looked up as the door opened, and Jace saw eyes that were entirely gold, with no pupils. They were wide with terror. "What is this?" Jace asked, his voice dangerously low. Rask chuckled, mistaking Jace's tone for awe. "A beauty, isn't she? A Valari female, rare, very rare. Found drifting in a life pod near the asteroid belt. We usually sell them to the orbital brothels, but this one, she has a spirit, needs a strong hand." Jace stared at the girl. She was trembling. She shrank back against the bars, shielding her face with her hands. "She is sentient," Jace said. He felt a cold rage pooling in his stomach. "This is a person," Rask shrugged. "Legally, she is salvage. No citizenship papers, no alliance protection. Under maritime law, she is property. And let me tell you, she is fully functional." The girl whispered something. It was a broken, guttural dialect of the trade tongue, the common language of the spaceways. "No training," she whimpered, her voice cracking. "Please, no more training." Jace saw the bruises on her arms. He saw the burns on her neck where the collar had obviously corrected her. The shopkeeper tapped the bars with a stun baton. "Quiet, you." Jace's hands gripped the cold metal of the outer barrier. They were shaking. He looked at the creature, the woman in the cage. She looked back at him, and in her golden eyes, he saw a depth of intelligence and pain that no animal could possess. He muttered the words, half to himself, the absurdity of the situation crashing down on him. The human veteran expected a pet, but found a terrified alien princess waiting in a cage instead. He did not know she was a princess yet. Of course, he only knew that she was terrified. Lizera watched the human male. He was large, scarred, and radiated a kinetic danger that made her skin prickle. But when he looked at her, his eyes did not have the hungry, oily slide of the shopkeeper. They were hard, yes, but there was a horror in them. She gathered her courage. If she was to be sold, she would not go silently. "Buying me," she hissed, her trade tongue clumsy but fierce. "Marks you." Rask laughed. "She talks a lot. We can surgically fix that for an extra 500 credits. "Marks you," she repeated, staring directly at Jace. "Trafficking network, high offices. You buy, you are one of them." Rask slammed the baton against the cage, sending a shower of sparks cascading down. The girl flinched but did not look away from Jace. "She is delirious," Rask said, waving a hand dismissively. "Thinks she is important. Listen, friend, I can see you are a man of discerning taste. I will give you a discount. Standard market price is 20,000. For you, 10,000. Jace looked at Rask. He wanted to reach through the bars, grab the man by his greasy throat, and squeeze until the light went out of his cybernetic eye. But he knew how this city worked. If he killed Rask, the security drones would be here in 30 seconds. The girl would be impounded as evidence, thrown into a government holding cell, and likely sold to someone far worse than Rask within a week. He had to play the game. 10,000 is steep for damaged goods, Jace said. His voice was flat, betraying nothing of the storm inside him. Rask's eyes narrowed, then he smiled. A negotiator. I respect that. But this requires paperwork, non-disclosure agreement. We cannot have you telling the authorities where you got her, strictly for tax reasons. You understand. Rask pulled a data pad from his apron and held it out. Jace took the pad. He scanned the document. It was a standard black market liability waiver, styled with Gothic legal fonts. But as his eyes tracked the bottom of the screen, he stopped. There were routing numbers embedded in the footer, tiny, alphanumeric strings that most civilians would ignore as formatting codes. Jace recognized them. Alpha 9 Zulu, Blackstone Protocol. This was not just a shady pet shop. These were military-grade covert operations codes. The kind used by Black Ops divisions to offload assets that technically did not exist. A chill went down Jace's spine. This girl was not salvage. She was a prisoner of war who had been funneled into the private sector. If he walked away now, he would be safe. He could go home, drink a bottle of synthetic whiskey, and forget he ever saw golden eyes in the dark. But then he looked at her again. She was hugging her knees, watching him with a desperate, silent plea that cut through his apathy like a monomolecular blade. Fine, Jace said. He pulled a credit chip from his pocket. I will take her. Rask beamed. Excellent choice. You will not regret it. Just sign here. Jace pressed his thumb to the pad. The bioscanner flashed green. At the same moment, Jace tapped the hidden record function on his wrist comp. It began logging the audio, the location, and the transaction codes. Transferring funds. Jace said. The credits drained from his account. It was his entire pension payment for the next 6 months. Rask tapped a code on the cage. The energy field dropped. He unlocked the physical door. Collar remote, Rask said, tossing a small black device to Jace. 1 button for shock, 2 for sedative. Do not take it off. She is fast. Jace caught the remote. He looked at the girl. Get up, he said. She did not move. She looked at the open door, then at him. I said, get up. We are leaving. She slowly unfurled her limbs. She stood, shaky on her feet. She was taller than she looked sitting down, nearly reaching Jace's chin. She stepped out of the cage, her bare feet slapping on the cold concrete. As she passed Rask, She spat at him. Rask raised his hand to strike her. Jace moved. It was a blur of motion. His hand clamped around Rask's wrist, stopping the blow inches from the girl's face. "Do not touch my property," Jace snarled. He squeezed. Rask yelped as the bones in his wrist ground together. Jace shoved the man back. Rask stumbled into a stack of cages, sending robotic birds screeching. "We are done here," Jace said. He grabbed the girl's arm, gently but firmly, and pulled her toward the exit. The alleyway behind the shop was dark, lit only by the intermittent flash of a faulty street lamp. Rain fell in sheets now, cold and acidic. The girl, Lysra, stumbled. Her legs, unused to walking after who knew how long in a cage, gave out. She pitched forward. Jace caught her. His arm went around her waist, hauling her up. Her skin was hot, feverishly so. As his hand made contact with her side through the thin fabric of her rags, a shock went through him. It was not static electricity. It was a physical wave of sensation, a rush of heat that raced up his arm and slammed into his chest. His heart skipped a beat. His breath hitched. Lysra gasped. Her head snapped up, her golden eyes locking onto his. The bioluminescent markings on her cheeks flared bright, turning from a dull violet to a pulsing, vivid neon blue. For a second, the rain seemed to stop. The filth of the alley vanished. There was only the heat of her body against his, the smell of ozone and alien spice, and a sudden, terrifying pull. It was a biological imperative, a chemical signal that bypassed his logic and hit his lizard brain. Protect. Hold. Keep. Jace shoved her away. He stumbled back, his hand going to his chest. What the hell was that? Lysra leaned against the brick wall, panting. Her markings slowly dimmed, though her cheeks remained flushed. "Biofield," she whispered. "Stress response. Do not touch me." Jace wiped the rain from his face. He felt flushed, his own blood singing in his ears. "I have no intention of touching you," he said roughly. "Can you walk?" "Yes," she said, though her knees were shaking. "Good. Keep up." He turned and started walking, checking the corners. He did not offer her his arm again. High above them, a surveillance drone hovered silently in the rain. Its matte black casing blended perfectly with the night. A single red lens rotated, focusing on the back of Jace's jacket. It recorded the limp in his walk, the way the alien girl trailed behind him, and the heat signature fading from where their bodies had touched. The data packet was compressed, encrypted, and beamed directly to a private server in the spire of the governance citadel. Jace's apartment felt even smaller with her in it. He ushered her inside and locked the door, engaging the 3 heavy deadbolts. "Sit," he said, pointing to the chair. Lysra sat. She looked around the bleak room, her eyes lingering on the empty ration packs and the single unmade bed. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. Jace went to a metal footlocker at the end of his bed. He rummaged through it, pushing aside old ammunition clips and a faded picture of his squad, until he found a toolkit. He pulled out a laser cutter and a multi-frequency signal jammer. He dragged a crate over to the chair and sat in front of her. "I am going to take the collar off," he said. Lysra flinched. "No, it is booby-trapped. If you tamper with it, it will detonate." "I know," Jace said. "I was a combat engineer for the 101st Drop Corps. I have disarmed mines with shorter fuses than this." He held up the jammer. "This will isolate the signal. The laser will cut the locking mechanism. You need to stay perfectly still." Lysra looked at the tools, then at his hands. His hands were large, scarred, and rough. "You are shaking," she said. "I am fine," Jace snapped. "Lean forward." She hesitated, then leaned her head toward him, exposing the back of her neck. Jace switched on the jammer. A high-pitched whine filled the room. He brought the laser cutter up. The smell of ozone increased. Jace could feel the heat radiating from her skin again. It was distracting. He forced himself to focus on the microcircuitry visible through the translucent casing of the collar. He had to be precise. One slip, and the charge inside would blow her head off, and likely take his hands with it. "Hold your breath," he muttered. He activated the laser. A thin beam of blue light sliced into the metal. Sparks showered down, landing on his hands and her skin. She hissed in pain but did not move. Closer. He had to sever the primary loop without tripping the tamper sensor. His heart was pounding against his ribs like a sledgehammer. It was not just the danger. It was the proximity. Her scent filled his nose. The heat from her body was making him sweat. There was a click. The red light on the collar died. "Got it," Jace breathed. He pried the metal band open. It fell to the floor with a heavy clang. Lysera gasped, a deep, desperate intake of air. She slumped forward, collapsing against Jace's chest before he could pull away. He froze. Her head rested on his shoulder. She was shaking violently now, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. He awkwardly raised his hands, hovering them over her back, unsure of what to do. Finally, instinct took over. He placed one hand on her shoulder and the other on her back. She was so small, so fragile. "Thank you," she whispered into his jacket. Jace swallowed hard. He pushed her back gently, needing to put space between them before the biofield did something to his brain again. "Here," he said, grabbing a bottle of water from the table and handing it to her. "Drink." She took it, her hands trembling. She drank greedily. Jace sat back on the crate, wiping grease and sweat from his forehead. "Now," he said, "tell me who you really are. And do not give me any lies about being a salvage drift." Lysera lowered the bottle. She looked at him, her golden eyes clear for the first time. The fear was still there, but something else had taken its place, a regal, icy dignity. "I am Lysera Valorian," she said, "third daughter of the High Sovereign, princess of the Orion Coalition." Jace stared at her. The Orion Coalition was their ally. The war had ended 5 years ago with a treaty signed by her father. "You are dead," Jace said flatly. "It was on the news. You died in a shuttle accident 2 years ago." "I was erased," she corrected. "My uncle, Regent Valen. He orchestrated the coup. He needed me gone to secure his claim to the throne, but he could not kill me publicly. So he sold me." "Sold a princess to a pet shop?" Jace asked, skepticism coloring his voice. "He sold me to the syndicate," she said. "They passed me down the line. I have been in 3 different camps before I ended up here. They wanted me to disappear into the dark economy, to be used until I broke." She tapped her chest, right over her heart. "But I stole something before they took me." Jace leaned forward. "Stole what?" "Information," she said. "A biotech implant. I swallowed it. It anchored itself in my thoracic cavity. It contains encrypted data, transaction logs, war orders, proof that the war that killed your friends and mine, was not a conflict of ideologies." She looked straight into Jace's eyes. "It was a manufacturing deal. Human admirals and my uncle's faction. They extended the hostilities to drive up the price of orbital ore. They are still doing it. They are planning another flare-up." Jace felt the room spin. If what she said was true, everything he had fought for, everything he had lost his leg for, was a lie. It was just a balance sheet for some rich men in high towers. He stood up, pacing the small room. This is insanity. If you have that data, why hasn't anyone come for you?" "They are coming," she said quietly. "They just did not know where I was. Until you bought me. That transaction. The codes. Jace looked at his wrist comp, the Black Ops codes. Suddenly, the holoscreen on his wall flickered to life. It was a breaking news alert. The screen showed a grainy, distorted image of a figure that looked suspiciously like Lysera, taken from a security camera in a transport hub months ago. "Urgent alert," the announcer's voice boomed. "Dangerous contraband stolen from classified facility. Biological hazard. Suspect is a rogue xenoform carrying a class of viral payload." The image changed to a rotating bounty notice. The sum was staggering. 5 million credits, dead or alive. Jace looked at the screen. Then he looked at the terrified princess sitting on his chair in a dirty, oversized shirt. "Dangerous contraband," Jace muttered. Lysera stood up, her eyes wide. "They found me." Jace checked his sidearm. It was fully loaded. He walked to the window and looked out. Far below, in the rain-slicked streets, he saw the telltale red and blue strobe lights of armored enforcement hover cars rising silently toward his level. "They are not here for the virus," Jace said, turning back to her. He racked the slide of his pistol. "Grab your shoes, princess. We are leaving." Jace woke the way he always did, instantly, with a lungful of air and his hand already tightening around the grip of the pistol beneath his pillow. The transition from sleep to wakefulness was not a drift but a violent snap, a combat protocol drilled into his nervous system 2 decades ago. He lay still, listening. The ventilation system hummed with its usual rhythmic rattle. The distant thrum of the maglev trains vibrated through the floorboards. But there was another sound, softer, like the rustle of dry leaves. He sat up, the pistol tracking silently across the room. Lysera was standing by the window. They had gone to ground in one of his contingency safe houses, a studio apartment in Sector 12 that he kept off the books, paid for with scrubbed credit chips. It was higher up than his main apartment, piercing the cloud layer where the smog thinned just enough to see the endless, flashing expanse of the megacity's upper atmosphere. She was bathed in the kaleidoscopic light of the holographic advertisements drifting past the glass. A massive, translucent koi fish swam through the air outside, casting rippling orange shadows across her face. She was wearing one of his spare shirts, a gray tactical undershirt that hung off her slender frame like a robe. It reached her knees, swallowing her silhouette. She looked small against the backdrop of the sprawling, hostile city, a single biological anomaly in a world of steel and code. Jace lowered the weapon, exhaling a breath he had not realized he was holding. He rubbed his face with his free hand, feeling the grit of exhaustion in his eyes. "You are standing in the open," Jace said, his voice rough with sleep. Lysera did not jump. She turned slowly, her golden eyes catching the reflection of a passing neon billboard. "I am not in the open," she said. "I am behind 3 inches of reinforced polyglass, and I am bored." "Jace." She struggled with the front of the shirt. Her long, violet-hued fingers were fumbling with the magnetic clasps. "Your clothing is illogical," she muttered. "It requires a degree in engineering just to secure the front panel." Jace swung his legs out of bed. He was wearing his fatigues, having slept fully dressed. He walked over to her, holstering the pistol on his hip. "It is a shirt, not a puzzle box," he said. He stopped in front of her. Up close, the damage was more visible. The bruises on her neck from the collar were turning a deep, angry indigo against her pale violet skin. But what caught his eye was the shirt. She had misaligned the magnetic strips entirely, leaving the fabric gaping open from her sternum to her navel. Beneath the gray cotton, her skin hummed with a faint rhythmic luminescence. It was not just a glow, it was a biological language. Soft pulses of blue light traced the lines of her ribs, reacting to her frustration. "You missed a clasp," Jace said. He reached out to fix it. It was an instinctive gesture, a soldier correcting a uniform deficiency. But the moment his knuckles brushed the skin of her sternum, the air in the room changed. It was instantaneous, a jolt of static electricity, but wetter, deeper. The heat from her body was not just temperature, it was a frequency. Jace felt a sudden, dizzying rush of dopamine hit his brain, a chemical command to lean closer. Lysera gasped, her eyes widening. The blue markings on her skin flared white-hot for a fraction of a second. Jace froze. His fingers were inches from her skin. He could smell her, a scent like ozone and crushed cinnamon. He looked at her face, and for a heartbeat, the war-torn city outside ceased to exist. There was only the gold of her eyes and the terrified magnetic pull between them. He snatched his hand back as if he had touched a live wire. "Fix it yourself," he said, his voice straining to remain level. He turned his back on her, marching toward the kitchenette unit. Lysera stood there for a moment, the silence thick and heavy. "I did not mean to do that," she said softly. "It is a reflex. My species. We are empathic conductors. When I am stressed, my biofield seeks a grounding point. Just button the shirt." "Lysera," Jace said, grabbing a ration bar and ripping the wrapper open with unnecessary force. He heard the soft clicks of the magnetic clasps snapping into place. "We need rules," Jace said, not turning around. "If we are going to survive this without killing each other or getting caught, we need protocol." "I agree," Lysera said. Her voice had regained some of its imperious edge. "Rule 1, Jace said, turning to face her. "Stay away from the windows. Them facial recognition drones patrol this altitude. If they get a lock on your bone structure, we are dead in 10 minutes. Lysera nodded. "Fine. No windows." "Rule 2. Jace continued. "Do not touch anything that has an antenna or a screen unless I clear it. You do not know what transmits and what does not." "I am not a primitive." "Jace," she snapped, crossing her arms. "We have computers in the Orion Coalition. Your computers do not run on black market military encryption," Jace countered. "One wrong keystroke and you could broadcast our location to every bounty hunter in the sector." "Fine," she said, lifting her chin. "Now, my rules." Jace blinked. "Your rules?" "Yes." Lysera stepped forward, her bare feet silent on the metal floor. "Rule 1. No cages. I will not be locked in a room. If you leave, I have the code to the door." Jace hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed." "Rule 2, she said, her golden eyes narrowing. "No collars, no restraints. And you do not speak to me as if I am a recruit in your platoon. I am a royal heir, not a dog you picked up in an alley." "I did pick you up in an alley," Jace pointed out. Lysera bared her teeth. They were sharp, feline, a technicality. "Rule 3, she finished, her voice softening slightly. "You tell me the truth. Always. Even if it is bad, I have had enough lies to last a lifetime." Jace looked at her. He saw the tremble in her hands that she was trying to hide by gripping her elbows. He saw the exhaustion etched around her eyes. "Deal," Jace said. The next few hours were a lesson in the absurdity of cohabitation. Jace attempted to show her how to use the sanitation unit. The shower was a sonic pulse system, standard for water-scarce megacities. Lysera stared at the control panel. "Where is the water?" "No water," Jace explained. "Sonic waves vibrate the dirt off. It is efficient." "It sounds like a torture device," she said, eyeing the booth suspiciously. "It beats smelling like a pet shop," Jace said. He left her to figure it out, standing guard in the main room. 5 minutes later, he heard a shriek. He burst into the bathroom, weapon drawn, only to find Lysera huddled in the corner of the booth, the sonic emitters humming loudly. "It tickles," she yelled over the hum. "It feels like 1,000 insects eating my skin." "Turn the dial down," Jace shouted back. She slapped the panel and the machine whirred to a halt. She stepped out, her hair standing on end from the static charge, looking furious. "I hate human efficiency," she declared. "Later." He found her in the kitchenette, holding a bar of synthetic soap he kept for emergencies. She was sniffing it. "This smells like lavender," she said. "Is it a nutrient block?" "Put that down," Jace said, taking it from her. "That is soap. You wash with it. If you eat it, you will be foaming at the mouth for 3 hours." "I thought it was a ration," she said, looking offended. "Your food dispenser is empty, by the way." Jace sighed. "I will go to the market later." He sat down at the small table and gestured for her to join him. "We need to check your injuries." Lysera hesitated, then sat. She pulled the collar of the oversized shirt down, exposing her shoulder. The skin was raw where the slaver's restraint bar had dug in. Jace opened a medical kit, retrieving a canister of dermal regenerator gel. "This is going to sting," he warned. "Do it," she said, staring straight ahead at the blank wall. Jace squeezed a dollop of blue gel onto his fingers. He hesitated. The memory of the shock he had felt earlier was still fresh. "I am going to touch you now," he said. "I know," she replied. Her voice was tight. He applied the gel. It hissed as it made contact with her wound. Lysera winced, her breath hitching. Jace worked in silence, his movements precise and clinical. But as he rubbed the gel into the bruise, he saw the bioluminescence on her shoulder flare again. It was not the sharp blue of fear this time. It was a soft, pulsating violet, warm and slow. He could feel her emotions bleeding into him through the contact points. It was a strange, invasive sensation, a wash of profound sadness, followed by a spike of gratitude that tasted like sugar on the back of his tongue. "You are loud," Jace murmured. "I cannot help it," she whispered. "My skin, it talks. It is how we court, how we mourn. To be touched without intent is confusing." Jace pulled his hand away, wiping the excess gel on a rag. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice low. "Not the shopkeeper. Before him." Lysera pulled the shirt back up, covering the glow. "My uncle," she said, "Regent Valen." Jace leaned back in his chair. The Regent, the man currently sitting on the throne of the Orion Coalition. "He orchestrated the coup," Lysera said, her voice devoid of emotion. "He claimed my mother, the sovereign, was weak, that she was too lenient with the human alliance. He wanted the war to continue." "Why?" Jace asked. "The war was grinding both our economies to dust." "Not everyone's economy," Lysera said. She tapped her chest. "The implant, it is in here, anchored to my sternum bone. What is on it?" "Proof," she said. Valen was not acting alone. He was coordinating with human leadership. Admiral Stukov, General Vance, they were staging battles. They would agree on a sector to contest. Send in thousands of troops, your friends, my people, and let them slaughter each other. Then, the mining corporations would swoop in to salvage the debris fields and claim the emergency resource rights. Jace felt a cold numbness spread through his limbs. General Vance had been his commanding officer. Vance had pinned the silver star on Jace's chest after the siege of Tannhauser. "They were farming us," Jace whispered. "Yes," Lysera said. "We were not soldiers to them. We were overhead. Necessary expenditure to keep the military-industrial engines turning." She looked at Jace, her golden eyes searching his face. "When I found the data, I tried to run. Valen caught me. He could not execute me. The royal guard would have revolted. So he drugged me, falsified a shuttle crash, and sold me to a slaver ring. He thought if he buried me deep enough in the filth of the Undercity, I would die of neglect or shame. Jace looked at his mechanical hand. He clenched it into a fist, the servos whining. I served under Vance for 10 years, Jace said. I killed for him. I lost my leg on a mission he ordered. He told us it was to stop a terrorist cell. And? Lysera asked. It was a civilian transport, Jace said. His voice cracked. We realized it too late. We breached the hull, expecting insurgents. It was families, refugees. Vance told us the intel was bad, that the enemy had used them as shields. But there were no enemy combatants on that ship. Just us. He looked up at Lysera. I thought I was a soldier. I was just a janitor, cleaning up loose ends for a profit margin. Lysera reached out. She placed her hand over his fist. The biofield hit him again, but this time it was not a shock. It was a steady, warm pressure. He felt a wave of understanding wash over him, a physical sensation of empathy that was more articulate than any words. We are both ghosts, Jace, she said softly. But ghosts can still haunt the living. Night fell over the megacity, turning the sky into a bruised purple bruise. Jace took the couch, giving Lysera the bed. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sirens wailing in the distance. He could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the civilian transport. He saw Vance's smiling face. A sound from the bed made him sit up. Lysera was thrashing. She was tangled in the sheets, making low, distressed keening noises in her throat. No, she whimpered. No, please. The room was filling with a scent. It was thick, heavy, and undeniably biological. It smelled of musk and terrified sweat, but beneath that, there was something sweet, something primal. Jace stood up. Lysera? She did not wake. She arched her back, her hands clawing at the empty air. Her skin was blazing with light, red jagged patterns that strobed in the darkness. The air grew heavy. Jace felt his heart rate spike. His breath caught in his throat. The pheromones she was releasing were a distress beacon, but to a human male's physiology, they translated as a potent, overwhelming aphrodisiac. He walked to the bed. Lysera, wake up. You are dreaming. He reached down to shake her shoulder. The moment his skin touched hers, she gasped and sat bolt upright. Her eyes were wide but unseeing. She grabbed his wrist. Please, she whispered. Do not hurt me. I will be good. The heat coming off her was incredible. Jace felt a surge of desire so violent it nearly knocked the wind out of him. It was biological warfare. Her fear was triggering a dominance response in him, a twisted evolutionary lock and key that he had no control over. He fell to his knees beside the bed, his face inches from hers. Her grip on his wrist was like iron. I am not going to hurt you, he rasped. Lysera blinked, her pupils dilating until the gold was almost gone. She leaned forward, her breath ghosted against his lips. The pull was magnetic. Every nerve ending in Jace's body was screaming at him to close the distance, to take what was being offered by the chemistry in the air. Their lips were millimeters apart. He could feel the heat radiating from her mouth. Then Lysera flinched. No, she gasped, jerking back. She scrambled backward against the headboard, pulling her knees to her chest. The light on her skin turned a chaotic, swirling gray. I am sorry, she stammered. I am sorry, it is the biology. It is a defense mechanism, appeasement. I do not want this. Jace stayed on his knees. He forced himself to breathe. In, out, in, out. He wrestled the chemical beast in his brain back into its cage. He stood up slowly and backed away, holding his hands up. "It is okay," he said. His voice was steady, though his blood was roaring. "It is okay." "I am programmed," she said, her voice shaking with shame. "When I am trapped, when I am scared. My body tries to bond, to find a protector. It is pathetic. It is survival," Jace said. He grabbed the chair from the corner and dragged it over, sitting down at a respectful distance. He looked her in the eye. "Listen to me. Lizra, I am not buying what the chemicals are selling. You are not a pet. You are not a toy." Lizra wiped her eyes. "I almost kissed you. You almost kissed me," Jace agreed. "And if we ever do that again, it is going to be because you decided to, not because your genes are panicking." She looked at him, surprised by the hardness in his tone. "You could have taken advantage," she whispered. "The shopkeeper. He would have." "I am not the shopkeeper," Jace said. "I am the guy who is going to help you burn your uncle's kingdom to the ground. But we do it as equals." Lysra stared at him for a long moment. Slowly, the chaotic gray on her skin faded, replaced by a steady, calm, amber glow. "Equals," she repeated, testing the word. "Go back to sleep." "Princess," Jace said, "I will take the first watch." The morning brought rain and a plan. They sat at the small table, eating protein blocks and drinking synthetic coffee. "We cannot decrypt the implant here," Jace said. "My tech is good, but it is not that good. That implant is royal encryption. If I try to crack it with a standard rig, it will melt the processor and likely send a beacon to the nearest orbital station." "So what do we do?" Lysra asked. "We need a specialist," Jace said. "I know a guy." He pulled up a secure messaging terminal on his datapad. "His name is Cade. We served together in the 101st. He washed out after the war, became a data broker in the Undercity. If anyone can crack a royal seal without tripping the alarms, it is him." Jace typed a message. It was short, using a cipher they had developed during the long nights on the Tannhauser Ridge. "Found a stray. Collar is heavy. Need a key. Old spot." He hit send. They waited. The rain drummed against the window. 10 minutes later, the terminal chimed. "Bring the stray. I have a bone. Clinic on 4th and Rust. 1 hour." Jace frowned. "What is it?" Lysra asked. He answered too fast. Jace said, "Cade is paranoid. He usually takes 6 hours to route a reply through 3 different proxy servers. Maybe he is just eager to help an old friend," Lysra suggested. Jace checked his pistol again. "Or maybe 5 million credits makes people move faster than usual." "We have no choice," Lysra said. "We cannot stay here forever." Jace nodded. "Get your coat and pull the hood up. We are going for a walk." The transit corridors of the Undercity were a sensory assault. The air smelled of recycled air, frying oil, and desperation. The crowd was a river of bodies, humans with chrome limbs, aliens in respirator masks, drones buzzing overhead like angry hornets. Jace moved through the crowd with the fluid, predatory grace of a wolf. Lysra stayed close to his side, her face hidden beneath the hood of a heavy canvas jacket Jace had given her. "Keep your head down," Jace murmured into his comms earpiece. They boarded a maglev tram heading for the lower levels. The car was packed. Jace positioned himself between Lysra and the rest of the passengers, creating a bubble of space. As the doors hissed shut, Jace glanced at the platform they were leaving. A man was standing near the ticket kiosk. He was wearing a long gray coat and reading a news scroll, but he was not reading it. His eyes were scanning the tram windows. Jace felt a cold spike in his gut. He knew that face. It was Miller, another ghost from the 101st. Miller had been a sniper. He never missed. "Don't look," Jace whispered to Lysra. We are being followed. Lysera stiffened. The bounty hunters? Worse, my old unit. The tram lurched forward, diving into the dark tunnels of the Undercity. Jace's mind raced. If Miller was here, it meant the cleanup crew was already active. They were not looking for a lost pet anymore. They were scrubbing the timeline. The clinic on 4th and Rust was a hole in the wall, literally. It was built into the ruins of an old subway station. The sign above the door flickered, Dr. Chop, Cybernetics Biomods. Jace kicked the door open. The waiting room was empty, save for a few malfunctioning service droids. A man in a white lab coat stained with blue fluid stood behind the counter. He looked nervous. "You Cade's friend?" the man asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Where is Cade?" Jace asked, stepping inside and pulling Lysera with him. He is in the back, setting up the rig. He told me to scan the girl first, make sure the hardware is compatible. Jace didn't like it. The man was sweating too much. The room was too quiet. "Just the scan," Jace said. "If you try anything else, I will redecorate this room with your gray matter." The tech nodded frantically. "Just a scan. Just a scan." He led them into a small examination room. A massive bioscanner hung from the ceiling, looking like the eye of a giant insect. Lysera stepped onto the platform. She lowered her hood. The tech gasped. "A Vailari. I thought, just do the job," Jace growled. The tech typed a command. The scanner hummed to life. A beam of red light swept over Lysera's body, lingering on her chest. The monitor on the wall exploded with data streams. Red text scrolled faster than the eye could follow. Encryption level. Omega. Royal seal detected. Massive data cache. Holy mother of... The tech breathed. "There are terabytes in there. This isn't just data. It's a whole archive." Suddenly, the lights in the room turned red. A low, pulsing alarm began to sound. "What did you do?" Jace shouted, leveling his gun at the tech. "Nothing!" The tech screamed, backing away. It was automatic. The moment it read the Omega key, it pinged the grid. It's a silent alarm linked to the governor's office. "We have to go," Lysera said, jumping off the platform. Jace grabbed her arm. "We are leaving. Now!" He turned toward the door. "Abort!" Jace yelled. "We are burned!" But it was too late. The front wall of the clinic dissolved. It was not an explosion of fire, but of concussive force. A breaching charge blew the brick and mortar inward, filling the room with choking dust and debris. Jace threw himself over Lysera, tackling her to the ground as chunks of ceiling rained down around them. Through the ringing in his ears, Jace heard the stomping of heavy magnetic boots. "Secure the asset," a voice boomed, amplified by a helmet speaker. "Lethal force authorized for the collaborator." Jace looked up through the dust. 6 figures in matte black combat armor stood in the hole where the wall used to be. They carried suppressed assault rifles. Laser sights cut through the smoke. 6 red dots dancing across the floor before converging on Lysera's chest. Jace tightened his grip on his pistol. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The clinic dissolved into a storm of pulverized brick and white dust. Jace did not think. Thinking was a luxury for civilians and officers. Grunts relied on muscle memory, and Jace's muscles remembered exactly what to do when a room exploded. He grabbed the edge of the heavy steel examination table and heaved. The servos in his mechanical leg whined, a high-pitched scream of torque as he flipped the table onto its side. It slammed into the floor with a deafening clang, creating a makeshift barricade just as the air filled with the angry hornet buzz of suppressed automatic fire. "Stay down," Jace roared. He shoved Lysera behind the metal slab. Bullets sparked against the other side, glowing hot orange where they struck. Jace drew his pistol. It was a heavy kinetic slug thrower, outdated but reliable. He did not pop up to aim. He waited for the rhythm. Thud, thud, thud. Pause. He spun around the edge of the table. Two enforcers in matte black armor were advancing through the hole in the wall, their movements synchronized. Jace fired twice. The first round hit the lead enforcer in the throat, right between the helmet and the chest plate. The man gargled and dropped. The second round took the rear guard in the knee joint. Armor shattered. The guard buckled, screaming. Jace ducked back as a fresh wave of laser fire scorched the air where his head had been a second before. "We are pinned!" Jace yelled over the noise. Lysera was huddled against his back. Her skin was flashing a chaotic, blinding white, pure panic. Suddenly, a section of the back wall, behind the terrified tech's workstation, blew inward. This explosion was controlled, precise. A figure shrouded in a thermal dampening cloak stepped through the smoke. He held a high-caliber breech gun in one hand. "If you are done playing hero." "Jace, the exit is this way," the figure shouted. The voice was distorted by a modulator, but the sarcasm was unmistakable. "Who is that?" Lysera cried, covering her ears. Jace grabbed her arm. "Our ride! Move!" He fired 3 suppressing shots blindly over the table to keep the enforcers' heads down, then hauled Lysera to her feet. They sprinted toward the new hole in the wall. The masked figure waited until they were through, then slapped a sticky charge onto the door frame. Fire in the hole, the stranger deadpanned. As they dove into the damp service tunnel beyond, the charge detonated, collapsing the tunnel entrance and burying the pursuit under tons of ferro-concrete. They did not stop running for 20 minutes. The chase led them through the bowels of the megacity, a labyrinth of steam pipes, dripping condensation, and the endless throbbing hum of the power grid. It felt like they were running through the arteries of a dying giant. They scrambled up vertical maintenance shafts, the rungs slick with oil. They dodged through a hover-tram depot, weaving between massive rusted cargo containers as automated loaders swung overhead like predatory birds. The city was a vertical machine. Below them, the undercity was a glowing abyss of red fog and poverty. Above, the skylanes were rivers of white light, carrying the wealthy to their spires. Jace's mechanical leg was burning, the heat sinks struggling to vent. Lysera was panting, her barefoot steps light but stumbling with exhaustion. "Here," the masked man said. He shoved open a rusted hatch marked with a radiation warning symbol. Jace hesitated. "It is a fake sign," the man said. "Keeps the scavengers out. Get inside." They spilled into a room that smelled of stale pizza and ozone. It was a chaotic mess of computer servers, disassembled drones, and piles of old physical media. Screens covered every wall, flickering with surveillance feeds from across the sector. The masked man holstered his weapon and reached up to pull off his cowl. Underneath was a face Jace knew better than his own, a face with a crooked nose, a jagged scar running through one eyebrow, and a weary, cynical grin. "Cade," Jace breathed. "You look like hell." "Jace," Cade said. He walked over to a mini-fridge and pulled out a beer. "And you brought a friend. I thought you said you were buying a dog." "I did not say dog," Jace corrected, holstering his own weapon. "I said stray." Lysera stood by the door, her chest heaving. Her markings were dim, pulsing a wary gray. "This is Cade?" she asked, looking at the man who was currently kicking a pile of dirty laundry under a desk. "This is the elite hacker." Cade cracked the beer open. Elite is a strong word. "I prefer freelance information architect. And you must be the 5 million credit girl." He tapped a key on his main console. The central screen flared to life. It displayed a rotating wireframe of Lysera's face. Next to it, the bounty amount had changed. The text flashed in urgent red. "Priority update. Asset designated Omega level threat. Capture preferred." Termination authorized if containment fails. They took the gloves off, Cade said, taking a long drink. Once that scan hit the network, the bounty went up. They do not just want you back, Princess. They want you silenced. Lysera wrapped her arms around herself. They want to kill me. They want to erase you, Cade corrected. There is a difference. Killing is messy. Erasing is clean. It means you never existed. He threw a med kit to Jace. Patch her up. I need to see what is on that implant before they scorch the local grid. Jace sat Lysera down on a worn leather couch. He used antiseptic wipes to clean the dust and blood from her arms. She flinched as the alcohol stung her scrapes. Hold still, Jace murmured. You are shaking again, she whispered. Adrenaline dump, Jace said shortly. It happens. He bandaged a cut on her forearm. His hands were rough, but his touch was careful. He could feel the bioelectric hum of her skin against his fingertips. It was soothing, in a strange way, a reminder that she was alive. Cade was typing furiously at his terminal. The air in the room grew hot as the servers revved up. Got it, Cade muttered. The encryption is royal stock, but it is built on an old Alliance kernel. I am bypassing the handshake protocols, and we are in. The screens on the wall changed. Instead of camera feeds, they filled with documents, video logs, and transaction manifestos. Jace stood up and walked to the wall. Lysera followed, her steps tentative. It was a library of treason. There were recordings of Regent Valen sitting in a dim room with General Vance and Admiral Stukov. They were drinking wine and laughing. The skirmish in Sector 7 went well. Vance was saying in the video, casualty rates within acceptable projections. The mining stocks are up 12%. My niece is becoming suspicious, Valen replied on the screen. She asks too many questions about the prisoner transfers. Handle her, Stukov said, waving a hand. Or we will. Jace felt sick. He remembered Sector 7. He had lost 3 men there. He had thought they were holding the line against an invasion force. They were just boosting stock prices. Look at this, Cade said, his voice losing its sarcastic edge. He pulled up a manifest. It was titled Luxury Export, Biological Assets. It was a list, thousands of names, political dissidents, whistleblowers, witnesses to war crimes. They were not just selling prisoners, Cade said softly. They were trafficking anyone who knew the truth, labeling them as pets, shipping them off to private collectors in the Outer Rim where no one asks questions. Lysera let out a choked sound. She reached out and touched the screen. I knew them, she whispered. Lady Alara, Captain Thorne, my tutor, Master Hideo. They told me they died of the plague. She turned away, her face buried in her hands. My whole family, she sobbed. My people, we are monsters. Jace stepped closer to her. No, we are, she cried, looking up at him, tears streaming down her violet cheeks. Look at what we did. Look at what we allowed. Are we even worth saving? Jace, maybe we should let the war happen. Let us burn for this. Jace grabbed her shoulders. He turned her to face him. Listen to me, he said fiercely. The people in those cages, they are your people too. The soldiers dying in the mud, they are my people. They are not the ones doing this. He pointed at the screen, at Valen's smiling face. That is the monster, and he is counting on you to give up. He wants you to believe that everyone is as rotten as he is. Lysera trembled under his grip. Her golden eyes searched his face. You really believe that? She asked. That we are not all broken? Jace looked at Cade, then back at her. I have to believe it, he said. Otherwise, I should have put a bullet in my own head years ago. The adrenaline faded, leaving a hollow ache in their bones. Kate had gone to the back room to secure a transport route, giving them a moment of privacy. The safe house was dim, lit only by the blue glow of the server racks. Lizera sat on the couch, staring at nothing. Jace sat beside her, checking the magazine of his pistol for the 10th time. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For not leaving me at the clinic. You could have run." "I do not leave people behind," Jace said. Lizera turned to him. She moved closer, until her knee brushed against his thigh. The contact sent a spark through him, a warm, inviting pulse. "I was terrified," she confessed. "When the wall exploded, I thought it was the end. And the only thing I could think of was that I did not want to die without feeling something other than fear." She leaned her forehead against his. Her skin was hot, radiant. Jace could smell the cinnamon ozone scent of her, stronger now. "Lizera," Jace warned, his voice low. "The biology again." "No," she whispered fiercely. She pulled back slightly to look him in the eyes. "No biology. The chemicals are quiet. Jace, I am not flashing. I am not broadcasting." She was right. Her skin was a steady, soft violet. "No strobing lights. No pheromone spikes. This is me," she said. "I am scared. I am lonely. And you are the first person in 2 years who has touched me without trying to hurt me or own me." Jace swallowed hard. He felt it too. The pull. It wasn't the frantic, drugged lust of the pheromones. It was gravity. It was the weight of 2 people who had been carrying the sky on their shoulders, finding someone else who understood the burden. "I am damaged goods." "Lizera," Jace said, his voice raspy. "I have more nightmares than memories. I am a trigger puller." "I do not see a trigger puller," she said. "I see the man who fixed my shirt." She reached out and cupped his face. Her thumb traced the scar on his jaw. "I want this," she whispered, "not because I need a protector, but because I want you." Jace closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. God, he was tired of being alone. "If we do this," he murmured, opening his eyes, "it is because we choose it. Not the trauma, not the war. Us. Us." She agreed. He leaned in. She met him halfway. The kiss was not like in the movies. It was not graceful. It was desperate. It was messy. It tasted of salt and stale coffee and fear. Jace's hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, needing to feel the reality of her against him. Lizera made a soft sound in her throat, her arms wrapping around his neck, holding on as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving universe. For a minute, the conspiracy did not exist. The bounty did not exist. There was only the heat of her mouth and the desperate beat of his heart. They broke apart, breathing hard, their foreheads resting together. Jace ran a thumb over her cheek. "We should stop," he said, his voice unsteady. "Before we do something we cannot walk back from. We need clear heads." Lizera nodded, though she did not let go of him. "Agreed," she whispered. "But later, when we are safe." "Later," Jace promised. A cough from the doorway broke the spell. Cade was leaning against the frame, looking pointedly at the ceiling. "I hate to interrupt the rom-com," he said dryly, "but we have a problem." Jace and Lizera pulled apart, straightening their clothes. Jace glared at Cade. "What did you find?" Jace asked. Cade walked to the main console. "I kept digging into the file structure. I found a scheduling log. The Stability Council, that is what Valen and the humans call their little club, is meeting in 48 hours. "Meeting where?" Lizera asked. Cade pointed to a map of the solar system. "Here. Station Deep Zenith. It is an orbital ring station between Earth and the Orion border. It is neutral ground. And? Jace asked. And they are planning an incident, Cade said grimly. They are going to blow up a diplomatic cruiser, a human cruiser, and they are going to plant evidence that it was done by Vylari extremists loyal to the late Princess Lysera. Lysera gasped. They are going to frame me? They are going to make you the face of the new war, Cade said. A martyr for the radicals, a villain for the humans. It gives them the perfect excuse to mobilize the fleets. We have to stop it, Lysera said. We cannot stop the bomb, Cade said. We do not know where it is. But we can stop the lie. He tapped the screen. Deep Zenith has a central broadcast relay. It overrides all civilian and military feeds in the sector for emergency announcements. If we can get Lysera's implant plugged into that relay, we can broadcast the truth to every screen from here to the Orion belt. Jace looked at the map. Deep Zenith is a fortress that we will never get past the docking clamps. We do not need to dock, Cade said, grinning a grin that Jace remembered from their worst missions. I know a smuggler. Runs a garbage scow. He can get us close. We go in through the waste disposal chutes. Garbage chutes, Lysera said, wrinkling her nose. How dignified. It is better than a cage. Princess, Jace said. The smuggler's ship, the Rusty Bucket, lived up to its name. It smelled of old refuse and engine grease. They huddled in the cargo hold as the ship burned hard toward orbit. The vibration was teeth-rattling. Jace tried to sleep in a hammock, but his snoring was loud enough to wake the dead. Does he always sound like a malfunctioning thruster? Lysera asked, sitting cross-legged on a crate nearby. Only when he is dreaming about shooting things, Cade said, checking his gear. Lysera threw a ration packet at Jace's hammock. Hey, Jace grunted, waking up? You are vibrating the hull, Lysera said. I was resting my eyes. Jace grumbled. You were declaring war on silence, she retorted. Cade looked between them and sighed. I feel like a third wheel on a honeymoon from hell. Can we focus? We dock in 10 minutes. The Rusty Bucket shuddered as it decoupled from the station's waste processing airlock. Time to go, Cade said. They suited up, not in armor, but in vacuum-sealed work suits. The airlock cycled. The gravity cut out. Jace floated up, flailing slightly. He hated zero-G. His mechanical leg was heavy, throwing off his center of mass. He banged his head against the ceiling. Graceful, Cade commented. Lysera, however, moved like water. Her species was evolved for arboreal environments, but the agility translated perfectly to weightlessness. She pushed off the wall, twisted in midair, and landed silently on the far bulkhead. Follow me, she said, smiling at Jace's awkward tumbling. Try not to break anything. She led the way through the maintenance tunnels. The station was a sterile white wheel, rotating slowly against the black backdrop of space. They moved silently, avoiding the patrol drones. Lysera was in her element. She moved ahead, scouting corners, using hand signals that Jace had taught her only hours ago. She is a natural, Cade whispered over the comms. She is fighting for her life, Jace replied, finally finding a handhold and pulling himself forward. That makes anyone a quick study. They reached the central relay hub. It was a massive room filled with cooling towers and thick bundles of fiber optic cables. There, Cade said, pointing to a console on a suspended walkway. The primary uplink. They drifted down to it. Cade plugged a portable decoder into the port. Jace, plug her in, Cade said. Jace pulled a data cable from Cade's rig. He looked at Lysera. Ready? She nodded. She opened the top buttons of her shirt, exposing the faint scar on her chest where the implant was buried. There was a small port just beneath the skin. Jace connected the cable. Lysera winced as the connection clicked home. "Uploading," Cade said. "This will take 2 minutes." The progress bar on the screen crawled forward. 10%, 20%. Suddenly, the lights in the room turned from white to flashing red. A siren began to wail. "Unauthorized access detected. Security teams dispatched." "They found us," Lysera said, eyes wide. Cade didn't look up. He was staring at the screen. "Cade," Jace said, "speed it up." Cade's hand hovered over the console. He was not typing. He was holding a small drive in his other hand. "Cade." "What are you doing?" Jace asked, his voice dropping an octave. Cade turned to look at them. He looked tired. So incredibly tired. "They contacted me." "Jace," Cade said quietly. "Before I came to the clinic," Jace raised his weapon slowly. "Who contacted you?" "Stukov's people. They offered me a deal. Full pardon. Reinstatement. My pension back. All of it." Jace felt like he had been punched in the gut. "You sold us out?" Cade looked at the drive in his hand. "All I have to do is upload a kill code instead of the broadcast. It fries her implant, scrambles her brain. She dies instantly. I hand over the body. You and I walk away. Jace, we go home." Lysera froze. She looked at the cable connecting her heart to Cade's machine. She was trapped. "Do it, Cade," she said softly. "Save yourself." Cade looked at her. He looked at the fear in her eyes and the defiant pride beneath it. Then he looked at Jace. He looked at the friend who had dragged him out of the fire on Tannhauser Ridge. "I wanted to," Cade admitted. "I really wanted to. I miss being a hero." "Jace." He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "But I guess I am a bad businessman." Cade crushed the small drive in his hand. He threw it into the abyss of the cooling shaft. He turned back to the console and hammered the enter key. "Broadcast is live!" he shouted. The progress bar jumped to 100%. Every screen on the station and every news feed in the sector suddenly cut to static, then to the video of Regent Valen and the generals. The doors to the relay room hissed open. Security droids poured in. "Go!" Cade yelled. He pulled a grenade from his belt. "We are not leaving you!" Jace shouted, reaching for him. Cade slammed his hand on the blast door control, sealing himself inside the control booth. "Get her to the escape pods." Cade's voice crackled over the comms. "I will buy you time. Cade." "Go, you idiot! Make it count!" Jace stared at the thick glass. Cade waved, then turned to face the door as the droids began to cut through. He pulled the pin on the grenade. Jace grabbed Lysera. They pushed off the wall, flying down the 0G corridor toward the escape bay. Behind them, a muffled boom shook the station. They scrambled into the last escape pod. Jace slammed the launch button. The pod blasted away from the station, tumbling into the void. Jace strapped Lysera in, then strapped himself in. They stared out the viewport. The station was shrinking behind them. Jace checked the comms. "Cade? Cade, come in." "Static. Just static." "He is gone," Jace whispered. Lysera reached out and took his hand. She did not say anything. She just held on. They drifted in silence for a long time. The stars wheeled around them. Jace watched the sensor display. "We are crossing into Orion space," he said dully. "If the broadcast worked, there should be friendly ships out there." A shadow fell over them. It was not a friendly ship. A massive warship decloaked directly in their flight path. It was a jagged, predatory thing, bristling with weapons batteries. The hull was emblazoned with the royal crest of the Orion Coalition. "The Vanguard," Lysera whispered, "my uncle's flagship." A tractor beam lashed out, a green claw of energy that seized their tiny pod. The metal groaned. They were being reeled in. The comm screen flickered to life. Regent Valen's face appeared. He was smiling. It was a cold, reptilian smile. "Hello, niece," Valen said smoothly. "I saw your little broadcast. Very dramatic, but I am afraid you have only made things worse." Jace reached for Lysera's hand again. He squeezed it tight. "Prepare for boarding," Valen commanded. "We have much to discuss." The pod shuddered as it was pulled into the dark, gaping maw of the warship's hangar bay. The cell was not made of metal bars and concrete. It was a womb of bioluminescent cartilage and hardened resin, pulsing with the rhythmic thrum of the starship's heartbeat. Jace hung suspended in the center of the chamber, his wrists and ankles gripped by adaptive cuffs that felt less like shackles and more like cold, living tendrils. They tightened whenever he struggled, reading the electrical impulses in his muscles before he could even complete a thought. He was alone, but the room was crowded with ghosts. The alien interrogators, tall, slender beings with skin the color of polished slate, stood behind a semi-translucent membrane, observing him. They did not ask questions. They did not use pliers or electricity. They used memory. The air in the cell shimmered, and suddenly Jace was back on the Tannhauser Ridge. The smell of burning ozone and copper filled his nose. The heat was suffocating. He saw Miller, 20 years younger, screaming as the plasma mortar hit. He saw the faces of the refugees on the transport ship, the one General Vance had ordered them to purge. It was a neural feedback loop, a precise stimulation of his hippocampus designed to break him by forcing him to relive his worst failures in high-definition sensory overload. "Tell us about the network," a voice whispered in his ear, though no one was there. It was a telepathic projection, sliding into his brain like a needle. "Who are the contacts? Where's the data stored?" Jace grit his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes. He focused on a single point of reality, the pain in his phantom leg. The interface where flesh met metal was aching. It was the only thing that felt real. "I do not know what you are talking about," Jace rasped. The scene shifted. The refugees were gone. Now he saw Lysera. She was back in the cage at the pet shop. But this time, Jace was the one holding the shock collar remote. He was the one pressing the button. "See?" the voice whispered. "You are a weapon. You destroy everything you touch. You will destroy her too." Jace roared, thrashing against the organic restraints. The cuffs tightened until his bones creaked. 5 decks above. Lysera sat in a chair of woven gold and velvet, facing a table laden with exotic fruits and crystal decanters. The room was a masterpiece of Vylari architecture, sweeping curves, soft ambient light, and a panoramic viewport looking out at the streaking stars of hyperspace. Regent Valen sat opposite her. He looked every inch the grieving uncle. His robes were mourning black, but embroidered with the silver thread of the high court. He peeled a star fruit with delicate, manicured claws. "You look thin. Lysera," Valen said, his voice a low, soothing purr. "And your biofield is chaotic. Those savages treated you poorly." "I was not treated like a savage until you sold me to them," Lysera said. Her voice was steady, icy, but her hands were trembling beneath the table. Valen sighed, a sound of immense, weary patience. "Lysera, please. We have discussed this. You have been ill. You suffered a psychotic break after your mother's death. You ran away. The trauma has confused your memories. I have spent the last 2 years searching the galaxy for you, terrified that you had fallen into the hands of opportunists." He leaned forward, his golden eyes filled with fake concern. "The humans found you, didn't they? This veteran, this Jace, he brainwashed you, made you believe these terrible lies about your own family to turn you against the throne. It is a classic radicalization tactic." Lysra stared at him. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. I saw the transaction logs. Uncle, I carry the proof in my chest. Valen's expression hardened, just for a fraction of a second, before returning to benevolent sadness. The implant is a forgery, my dear, planted by the same terrorists who kidnapped you. But I can help you. I can remove it. We can heal you. He took a sip of wine. All you have to do is walk out onto that balcony tomorrow, address the fleet, and tell them the truth, that you were kidnapped by human extremists, that the data is a fabrication, and that you have returned to stand by my side as the symbol of our resilience. And if I refuse? Lysra asked. Valen gestured vaguely toward the floor. Then I cannot protect your human pet. The Black Ops team, General Vance's men, are very eager to speak with him. They want to know how deep the rot goes in their own ranks. I imagine their interrogation methods are less sophisticated than ours. They will take him apart. Lysra, piece by piece. Lysra felt a cold knot of nausea in her stomach. He is not my pet, she said. Valen smiled. Then save him. Be the princess your people need. Denounce the lies. Save the human. It is a simple trade. He stood up, smoothing his robes. I will let you rest. Think it over. But do not take too long. The humans are impatient. The heavy doors hissed shut, leaving her alone in the gilded cage. Lysra closed her eyes. She needed Jace, not to save her, but to anchor her. She reached out, not with her hands, but with her mind. The Vanguard was a bioship, its core systems grown from semi-sentient neural tissue. It was designed to respond to the royal bloodline. She placed her palms flat on the warm, vibrating floor. She pushed her consciousness down, past the shielding, past the security algorithms, diving into the ship's nervous system. Find him. Jace was drowning in a sea of fire. The illusion had shifted again. He was back in the burning clinic, but this time, Cade was not saving them. Cade was burning, his skin peeling away, screaming Jace's name. Jace! The voice was different. It did not have the metallic rasp of the interrogators. It was clear. Warm. Jace, look at me. The fire flickered. The screaming faded. Jace blinked, gasping for air. The cell was still there, but the walls were glowing with a soft, familiar violet light. He closed his eyes again, and suddenly, he was not in the cell. He was in his apartment. The cramped gray box in New Elysium. But it was different. The rain outside was silent. The air smelled of cinnamon and ozone. Lysra was standing by the window wearing his oversized shirt. She looked terrified, but her eyes were fierce. Lysra? Jace asked. His voice echoed in the mental space. Am I dead? No, she said. She walked toward him. This is the link. The ship is amplifying us. I am in the neural network. She reached out and took his hands. Her touch was solid, warm, grounding. They are hurting you, she whispered. I can feel it. Your pain. It is bleeding into the ship's hull. They are trying to break me, Jace said, looking down at their joined hands. They want the contacts. My uncle gave me a choice. Lysra said, denounce the truth or you die. Jace looked at her. Do not do it. Do not let them win. I will not, she said. But I am not letting you die either. She stepped closer. The space between them dissolved. In the physical world, they were decks apart. But here, in the shared architecture of their minds, they were chest to chest. Jace felt a sudden, overwhelming rush of sensation. It was not just touch. It was her. He felt her fear, sharp and cold like ice water. He felt her shame, a heavy, suffocating blanket. But beneath it all, he felt a burning, desperate hunger. She wanted him, not as a protector and not as a soldier, and she wanted him because he was the only thing in the universe that saw her as a person. And she felt him. She felt the crushing weight of his guilt, the survivor's sickness that ate at his gut. She felt his awe of her, his confusion, and the fierce, protective love that he was too stubborn to name. It hit them both like a physical blow. The barriers of language and skin were gone. "I am here," her mind whispered against his. "I choose this. I am here," he answered. "I am yours." The connection spiked. It was an overload of raw biological data. In the ship's core, the organic processors shrieked. The biomonitors in Jace's cell redlined. The emotional feedback loop was too intense, too chaotic for the ship's logic centers to process. The adaptive cuffs on Jace's wrists spasmed. They confused the surge of dopamine and adrenaline for a command code from a high-ranking officer. They clicked open. Jace's eyes snapped open in the real world. He fell to the floor of the cell, the hallucinations vanishing instantly. The door to his cell hissed open, the locking mechanism fried by the neural surge. Jace scrambled to his feet. He was bruised, bleeding, and exhausted. But he was free. "I am coming for you," he whispered. Jace moved through the corridors of the Vanguard like a virus in the bloodstream. He found a weapons locker near the detention block. He couldn't bypass the biometric lock, so he smashed the control panel with a fire extinguisher until the fail-safe triggered. Inside, there were no guns. There were Vylari bioblades, smooth, silver ovals that looked like liquid mercury frozen in time. Jace grabbed two. As his hands closed around them, the metal reacted to his body heat. It elongated, shifting and hardening into jagged, serrated daggers that fit his grip perfectly. "Nice," he muttered. He rounded a corner and ran straight into a patrol. 2 guards, armed with energy pikes. They shouted, raising their weapons. Jace did not stop. He dropped into a slide, the servos in his legs screaming as he propelled himself across the polished floor. He slashed upward. The bioblade sheared through the first guard's armor like it was paper. The second guard swung his pike. Jace caught the shaft with his mechanical hand, the metal ringing. He twisted, using the torque of his cybernetics to wrench the weapon away, and drove the second blade into the guard's shoulder joint. He left them groaning on the floor and kept moving. He had the layout of the ship in his head now. Lizera had planted it there during the link. He knew where she was. The court was gathered in the Grand Observer's Hall. Dozens of high-ranking officers, alien nobles, and a handful of human liaisons stood in hushed clusters. Lizera stood on a raised dais, flanked by Valen and 4 elite Praetorian guards. She wore a gown of shimmering white silk, a collar of diamonds around her throat that looked suspiciously like a restraint. Valen stepped forward, raising his hands. "My friends," he announced, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics. "Today is a day of celebration. The prodigal daughter has returned. She has come to set the record straight and renew our glorious alliance." He turned to Lysera, his eyes hard. "Speak, child." Lysera stepped up to the podium. She looked out at the sea of faces and she saw the human generals, Vance among them, looking smug. She saw the Vylari officers, some looking skeptical, others looking hopeful. She took a deep breath. She reached down into her own biology, tapping into the empathic field that all Vylari shared. Usually, it was a subtle sense. Today, she turned it into a shout. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she pushed a wave of truth into the room. She projected the feeling of the cold cage in the pet shop, the terror of the dark, the betrayal of her family. The officers in the front row flinched physically. A murmur ran through the crowd. They felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. "My uncle says I have been ill," Lysera said, her voice clear and strong. He says I was confused. She looked directly at General Vance. He says the war is necessary, that the dead are heroes. She pushed again. This time, she projected the image Jace had shared with her. The burning refugees, the lies, the cold calculation of profit over life. Vance shifted uncomfortably, loosening his collar. The Vailari guards looked at each other, their antennae twitching. But the truth, Lysera said, gripping the podium, is that we have been sold. All of us. Valen's smile vanished. He stepped forward, grabbing her arm. That is enough, he hissed. Suddenly, the heavy blast doors at the back of the hall exploded inward. Debris rained down on the dignitaries. Through the smoke, a figure emerged. He was covered in blue alien blood, limping heavily, holding two shimmering silver blades that dripped onto the floor. Jace, get your hands off her, Jace roared. Chaos erupted. Valen shouted, Guards! Kill him! The 4 Praetorians charged. Jace did not hesitate. He threw one of the bioblades. It spun through the air, a silver blur, and pinned the lead guard's shoulder to the wall. He charged the other 3. It was a dance of violence. Jace ducked under a swinging energy staff, sweeping the leg of the attacker with his metal limb. He spun, driving an elbow into the throat of the 3rd. Lysera did not stand idle. She grabbed the heavy crystal decanter from the table and smashed it over the head of the guard closest to her. Jace reached the dais. He grabbed Lysera's hand. Run! He yelled. They bolted through a side door, into the labyrinth of the royal quarters. They didn't stop until they reached a service bulkhead deep in the ship's engineering section. Jace slammed the manual override, sealing the heavy blast door behind them. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. His chest was heaving. Blood, his own and the guards', soaked his shirt. Lysera fell to her knees beside him. She grabbed his face, her hands frantically checking him for fatal wounds. You are alive, she sobbed. You are alive. Jace looked at her. Her white dress was torn, stained with wine and dust. She looked like a ruin. She looked beautiful. I told you I was coming, he gasped. She threw herself into his arms, and it wasn't a gentle embrace, it was a collision. She buried her face in his neck, her body shaking violently. Jace wrapped his arms around her, squeezing tight enough to bruise, needing to feel the solid reality of her to banish the ghosts of the torture cell. They held each other in the dim red light of the emergency strobes. The ship shuddered around them as alarms blared in the distance. I felt you, Jace whispered into her hair, in the cell. You pulled me out. I could not leave you there, she said fiercely, pulling back to look at him. I could not let them erase you. They stared at each other. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by something sharper, hotter. The boundary they had drawn in the safe house, the line between survival and desire, evaporated. Lysera kissed him. It was a reclaiming. It was a rejection of the cages, the collars, the politics, and the lies. It was 2 people standing in the wreckage of their lives and deciding that this skin, this breath, this moment, belonged to them. Jace's hands tangled in her hair. Lysera's fingers gripped his shoulders. They moved together, a tangle of limbs and desperate whispers. There was no magical bonding field this time, no pheromones forcing their hands. There was only the rough friction of his jacket, the softness of her skin, and the terrifying, wonderful choice to be vulnerable in a war zone. They made love on the floor of the engineering deck, hidden behind 3 inches of blast steel. It was not graceful. It was urgent. It was an affirmation of life in the face of death. For a brief, suspended eternity, they were not a veteran and a princess. They were just Jace and Lysera. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Jace's jacket draped over them like a blanket. The air was cooling. The sounds of the ship, shouting voices, marching boots were getting closer. Jace ran his hand down Lysera's arm, tracing the bioluminescent markings. They were glowing a soft, steady gold. Contentment. "We have to move," Jace said quietly. "They are cutting through the bulkheads." Lysera rested her chin on his chest. "I know." She looked at him, her expression serious. "Does this change things?" she asked. "What just happened?" Jace looked at the ceiling. "It changes everything, and it changes nothing. We are still in deep trouble. But at least now I know what I am fighting for." He sat up, wincing as his bruised ribs protested. "It wasn't the chemicals." "Lysera," he said, looking her in the eye. "It wasn't the trauma bonding. I wanted you. I still want you, and I want you," she said. She stood up, pulling the tattered remains of her dress around her. She looked at the door. "Valen tried to make me a symbol, a victim, a pet." She turned back to Jace, her golden eyes burning with a new, dangerous resolve. "I am done being a victim. Let's go to the core. I have a government to topple." The central organic core of the Vanguard was a massive chamber located in the center of the ship. It looked like a forest made of glass and light. Pillars of translucent neural tissue stretched from floor to ceiling, pulsing with data. "This is the brain," Lysera said. She walked to the central interface. It was a pool of liquid light. "If I enter the implant codes here," she said, "it will override the command structure. It will unlock the communication arrays and broadcast the full data packet to the homeworld." "Do it," Jace said, taking up a defensive position by the door. Lysera stepped into the pool. The liquid rose around her ankles. She placed her hand on her chest, over the implant. She gasped as the connection formed. Her eyes rolled back. The room began to hum. Access granted. Royal biometrics confirmed. The pillars of light turned from blue to gold. Suddenly, a slow clap echoed through the chamber. Jace spun around, weapon raised. Regent Valen stood on a walkway above them. He was surrounded by a dozen soldiers, including human Black Ops operatives in heavy armor. General Vance was with him. Very touching. Valen called down. "The rogue princess and her knight." "Valen," Jace growled. "It is over. The data is uploading." Valen chuckled. He descended the stairs, flanked by his guards. "You still do not understand, do you? You think the truth matters? You think if you show the people the ledger, they will rise up?" He stopped 10 feet away. "The Stability Council, my friends here, have already prepared a statement. We have flagged the upload as a deep-fake cyber attack launched by a radical terrorist cell." Vance stepped forward, chewing on a cigar. "We are spinning it as a biological attack. Jace, that little girlfriend of yours is carrying a mind control virus. That is why you turned traitor. That is why the crew is confused that we are going to quarantine the sector. And then," Valen added, "we are going to purge the infection." He gestured to the soldiers. "Kill the human. Secure the princess." Jace raised his blade. "I would like to see you try." Lysera's voice cut through the air. It was amplified by the ship itself, booming from every speaker. "Wait!" The soldiers hesitated. The room was vibrating. Lysera was glowing so brightly it was hard to look at her. She was not just uploading the data. She was rewriting the ship's loyalty protocols. "Soldiers of the Vanguard." Lysera's voice echoed. "Look at your screens. Look at the orders. On every data pad, every helmet HUD, every monitor on the ship. The raw files were appearing, not the edited versions. The raw video of Valen selling his own people. The manifests of the pet trade. 'This is your regent,' Lysera shouted. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. The Vailari guards lowered their weapons, looking at Valen with horror. The human Black Ops soldiers looked at Vance, waiting for orders. "It is a trick," Valen screamed. "It is a hallucination. Shoot them." Vance raised his rifle. "I am not getting paid enough for this debate." He fired. Jace moved. He tackled Lysera, knocking her out of the interface pool. The bullet sparked off the glass pillar where she had been standing. The connection broke. The upload paused at 40%. "We need to finish it," Lysera yelled. "We can't," Jace shouted, firing back with a stolen pistol. "We are pinned." Valen ran to the main navigation console. His face was twisted in a mask of pure fury. "If I cannot control the narrative," Valen snarled, "I will destroy the audience." He punched in a command code. A red siren began to wail. "Warning. Hyperspace drive engaged. Target coordinates locked." "Where is he taking us?" Jace yelled. Lysera looked at the display. Her face went pale. "He is jumping the ship into the atmosphere," she whispered. "Directly over the capital city." "Why?" Valen laughed. He pulled a lever, locking the navigation computer. "Because if a renegade princess crashes a warship into the Imperial Palace, killing millions, that is not a scandal. That is an act of war. It justifies everything I have done." The ship lurched violently. The stars outside the viewport elongated into streaks of white fire. They were in the jump. Valen turned to them, his eyes wild. "Welcome home, Princess. We are going to make quite an entrance." The transition from hyperspace was not a slide. It was a violent, atmospheric rupture. The Vanguard did not so much arrive in orbit as it was vomited forth from the tear in space-time, instantly displacing millions of tons of air and ionizing the upper atmosphere of Orion Prime. The capital city below, a sprawling jewel of crystalline spires and floating oceans, was suddenly cast into the shadow of the colossal warship. Inside the vessel, the sound was deafening. The organic hull groaned, a deep, resonant vibration that felt like the ship itself was screaming in pain. Jace stumbled, slamming his shoulder against a bulkhead as the artificial gravity fluctuated. The corridor around them was a nightmare of biology and technology gone wrong. The walls, usually a soothing pearl white, were now pulsing with angry, inflamed veins of red bioluminescence. The ship knew it was being used as a weapon against its own home, and it was rejecting the command. "We are low," Jace shouted over the wail of the proximity alarms. "Too low. The atmospheric friction is going to cook the outer hull. He is insane." Lysera gasped, pushing herself off the wall. She was pale, her skin slick with sweat, but her eyes were burning gold. "He wants to crash us. He wants to make it look like an assassination attempt by the humans." They ran. The corridors of the Vanguard had become a war zone. The crew was fractured. In the chaos of the broadcast and the sudden suicidal jump, the chain of command had snapped. Ahead of them, a squad of Vailari Marines was exchanging fire with a group of ship's security officers. Plasma bolts scorched the living walls, sending sprays of blue fluid hissing onto the deck. "Down!" Jace yelled. He tackled Lysera, sliding across the slick floor as a bolt of energy sizzled through the air where her head had been a second before. They scrambled behind a support pillar. Jace checked his weapon, a stolen kinetic rifle with half a magazine left. "Which ones are on our side?" Jace asked, peering around the edge. Lysera placed her hand on the vibrating floor. She closed her eyes. "The ones on the left," she said. "They are afraid. They are confused. The ones on the right, they feel cold, sharp. They are Valen's elite." Jace nodded, covering fire. "On my mark." He popped up, firing 3 controlled bursts. The kinetic rounds slammed into the elite guard's armor, knocking them back. "Run!" Jace commanded. They sprinted past the pinned guards. One of the sympathetic Marines looked up, saw Lysera, and lowered his weapon. "Highness?" the Marine stammered. "Get to the escape pods," Lysera shouted at him without stopping. "Get your people off this ship." They rounded a corner, heading for the turbo lift to the bridge. The ship shuddered violently, throwing them against the wall. Jace laughed, a sharp, manic bark. "What is funny?" Lysera demanded, hauling him upright. "I am currently running through an alien warship, assaulting the bridge of a foreign government, while technically AWOL from my own military." Jace wheezed, checking his ribs. "That is double treason. I think I just set a record." Lysera smirked, though her hands were shaking. "If we survive this, I will grant you diplomatic immunity," she said, "or at least a very nice cell in the royal dungeon." "You are too kind, Your Majesty," Jace retorted. He hit the call button for the lift. It arrived instantly, the doors hissing open. Inside, the music was playing, a soft, soothing Villari concerto that stood in stark, insane contrast to the screaming ship around them. Jace reloaded his weapon. "This is it," he said. "Once those doors open, there is no going back. I never wanted to go back," Lysera said. She smoothed the torn fabric of her dress. She looked like a wreck, bruised, dirty, barefoot. But as she stood there, the bioluminescent markings on her skin began to brighten. They shifted from the soft gold of contentment to a blinding, furious white. She did not look like a victim anymore. She looked like a supernova contained in a humanoid form. "Let us go say hello to my uncle," she said. The bridge of the Vanguard was a cathedral of command. The ceiling was a transparent dome, offering a terrifying view of the planet below. They were so low that Jace could see the cloud layers rushing past like white rapids. Regent Valen stood at the central command dais. He was screaming orders at a crew that looked paralyzed. "Target the Senate spire," Valen roared. "Lock main batteries! Sir, we cannot!" a navigation officer shouted, his hands hovering over his console. "The planetary defense grid is locking onto us. They are hailing us. They want to know why we are attacking." "Tell them the ship has been hijacked," Valen screamed. "Tell them the human terrorists have seized control. Fire the batteries." The turbo-lift doors blasted open. Jace stepped out first, dropping to one knee and firing a warning shot into the ceiling. "Nobody move," Jace bellowed. The bridge froze. 50 heads turned. Valen spun around. His face was a mask of twisted rage. General Vance stood beside him, looking significantly less confident than he had an hour ago. "Guards!" Valen shrieked. "Kill them! Kill!" 4 Praetorian guards raised their energy pikes. Lysera stepped out of the lift. She did not run. She walked, and as she walked, she pushed. It was not a physical push, it was a psychic shockwave. She broadcasted a single, overwhelming emotion: authority. "Stand down." The command echoed in the minds of everyone on the bridge. It was not a request. It was the voice of the bloodline, amplified by the raw fury of a woman who had been sold like cattle. The guards hesitated. Their pikes wavered. "Valen," Lysera said. Her voice was calm, but it carried across the vast room like a thunderclap. "It is over. The planet is watching." Valen sneered. "They are watching a tragedy, a fallen princess, corrupted by human filth, destroying her own legacy." He pointed a shaking finger at her. "You are sick, Lysera, broken." Lysera walked past the guards. They parted for her like water. "I was broken," she agreed. "You broke me. You sold me to a shop on the edge of the galaxy. You put a collar on my neck. You let them starve me. You let them beat me." She reached the center of the room. She looked at the crew, her people. "He told you I was dead," she said to them. "He told you the humans killed me." She pointed at the main view screen. Show them the black box, she commanded the ops officer. The officer, a young Vailari woman with wide eyes, looked at Valen, then at Lysera. She saw the light burning on Lysera's skin. She saw the truth. She hit the key. The main screen, which had been showing the terrified city below, flickered. It changed to a recorded video file. It was Valen. He was sitting in a dark room with a hologram of General Vance. "The shipments are behind schedule, General," Valen was saying on the screen. "I have 300 political prisoners in the holding cells. If you cannot move them, I will have to liquidate them." "We are moving them as fast as we can," the recorded Vance replied. "But the market for sentient pets is saturated. Maybe if we lowered the price on the children?" "Fine," Valen said, taking a sip of wine. "Sell the children at a discount. Just get them off my manifest and make sure my niece is in the next batch. I want her gone before the coronation." The silence on the bridge was absolute. The crew stared at the screen in horror. The term pets hung in the air like a poisonous gas. Valen stood frozen. His narrative, his carefully constructed lie of benevolent guardianship, crumbled into dust in 10 seconds. General Vance slowly began to back away toward the emergency exit, his hands raised. Valen looked at the crew. He saw the way they were looking at him. It was not fear anymore. It was revulsion. "No," Valen whispered. "No. It is a trick. It is a deep fake." He looked at Lysera. She stood there, glowing, triumphant, the living proof of his monstrosity. "If I cannot have the throne," Valen snarled, reaching for the pistol holstered at the waist of the guard next to him, "then no one will." He moved with the desperate speed of a cornered animal. He snatched the weapon and leveled it at Lysera's chest. "Die." Time seemed to slow down. Lysera saw the barrel rise. She saw the madness in her uncle's eyes. She could not move. Her biofield was extended too far, holding the crew in check. She was physically frozen. But Jace was not. Jace had been watching Valen's hands from the moment they stepped off the lift. He knew the look of a man who had run out of options. As Valen pulled the trigger, Jace threw himself forward. He did not think about the politics. He did not think about the war. He only thought about the girl in the cage who had held his hand when the nightmares came. "No!" Jace roared. He slammed into Lysera, shoving her sideways just as the weapon discharged. The sound was a wet, heavy thud. The kinetic round did not hit Lysera. It hit Jace. It punched through the side of his tactical vest, right below the ribs, shattering bone and shredding organ tissue. Jace gasped, the air leaving his lungs in a rush of red mist. He collapsed, hitting the deck hard. "Jace!" Lysera screamed. The spell on the bridge broke. "Traitor!" the ops officer shouted. 3 guards tackled Valen before he could fire again. They slammed him to the floor, wresting the gun from his hand. He screamed, cursing them, cursing the universe, as they dragged him down. Lysera did not watch. She scrambled across the floor to where Jace lay. "Jace! Jace, look at me." She turned him over. The wound was bad. It was catastrophic. Blood was pooling beneath him, dark and slick on the white deck. His face was already turning gray. Jace blinked, his eyes losing focus. He tried to smile, but blood bubbled past his lips. Did we win?" he rasped. "Yes," Lysera sobbed, pressing her hands over the wound, trying to stem the tide. "We won. You won. Just stay with me. Please, Jace, stay with me." Jace looked up at the dome. The planet was so close. It was beautiful. I expected a pet," he whispered, his voice failing. "Do not say it," Lysera cried, tears streaming down her glowing face. "But I found a queen," Jace breathed. His eyes drifted shut. His chest stopped moving. "No!" Lysera screamed. She looked at her hands. They were covered in his blood. She felt his life slipping away, fading like a radio signal into static. She could not let him go. She refused. She shifted her position, straddling his waist. She placed both hands directly over his heart. "Clear the comms," she shrieked at the bridge crew. "Open a channel! To the planet! To the fleet! To everyone!" "But Highness," the ops officer stammered. "Do it!" The officer scrambled to obey. Channel open, broadcasting on all frequencies. Lizra closed her eyes. She reached deep into the core of her being, past the exhaustion, past the fear. She tapped into the forbidden reserve, the vital life force that every member of the royal bloodline carried. It was a technique meant for stabilizing a dying starship, not a biological organism. It was suicide to use it on a human. She did not care. She poured herself into him. On the screens across the planet, in the Senate Hall, in the human embassy, on the data pads of soldiers in the trenches, the image appeared. A Valari princess, covered in blood and grime, kneeling over a dying human soldier. "I am Lysra Valerian," she said, her voice trembling with effort. "And I choose him." Her skin began to blaze. The light was blinding. It flowed from her hands into Jace's chest. "I do not choose him as a subject," she declared, her voice rising. "I do not choose him as a servant. I choose him as my equal. As my heart." The light intensified. Lysra gasped in pain. It felt like she was tearing pieces of her own soul away and stitching them into his. "The universe wants us to be enemies," she cried out, the energy arcing between them. "It wants us to be predator and prey, master and pet." Jace's body arched off the deck. His veins glowed with violet fire as her energy forced his heart to beat, forced his cells to knit back together. "I reject it," Lysra screamed. "I reject the war. I reject the hate." She leaned down, pressing her forehead against his. "Come back to me, Jace. Come back." The light flared one last time, a brilliant, silent explosion of white, and then vanished. Lysra collapsed on top of him. Silence. The bridge crew held their breath. The entire planet seemed to hold its breath. Then, a sound, a cough. Jace's chest heaved. He drew in a ragged, wet breath. Then another. He opened his eyes. They were not just brown anymore. There was a faint, lingering ring of violet around the iris. He looked up at Lysra. She was slumped over him, unconscious. The markings on her face, the intricate glowing swirls that marked her as royalty, were dim. Some of them had burned out completely, leaving faint white scars on her skin. She had given up her birthright to keep him. Jace reached up with a trembling hand and touched her face. "Princess?" he rasped. Lysra's eyelids fluttered. She opened her eyes. They were tired, but they were alive. "I told you," she whispered weakly, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. No more cages. Not even the cage of death. The arrest of Regent Valen was not dignified. Seeing that his niece had survived, and that the crew had turned, Valen broke free from the guards holding him. "You fools!" he screamed, his eyes darting to the navigation console. "I can still end this." He dove for the self-destruct interface. "Protocol Omega!" he shrieked. "Scuttle the ship!" He managed to punch in the first 3 digits of the code. General Vance, realizing the ship was about to become a very expensive fireball, decided his allegiance had officially shifted. Vance picked up a heavy command chair and swung it with surprising force for a man of his rank. The chair connected with the back of Valen's head with a sickening crack. The regent crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Vance straightened his uniform, looking at the Vailari guards who now had their weapons trained on him. "I believe," Vance said, raising his hands, "that constitutes a citizen's arrest. I would like to negotiate a plea deal." The aftermath was a blur of medical teams and political firestorms. Jace and Lysera were rushed to the Vanguard's medbay. The doctors, both human and Vylari, worked for 12 hours to stabilize them. When Jace finally woke up, the room was quiet. He was lying in a biobed. His side was heavily bandaged, and he felt like he had been kicked by a mule. But he was alive. He turned his head. Lysera was in the bed next to him. She was sitting up, wearing a clean medical gown. She was looking out the viewport at the planet below. "You are awake," she said softly, not turning around. Jace tried to sit up, groaning. "How long was I out?" "2 days," she said. "2 days?" Jace rubbed his face. "What happened?" "Everything," she said. She turned to look at him. Jace paused. She looked different. The elaborate bioluminescent patterns that used to cover her neck and cheeks were faded. The intricate royal crest on her forehead was gone, replaced by smooth, pale skin. "Your marks," Jace said. "The price of the technique," she said, touching her face. "I burned out the royal conduits. I am diminished." Jace swung his legs over the side of the bed. He ignored the pain and stood up. He walked over to her bed and took her hand. "You are not diminished," he said fiercely. "You are brighter than you have ever been." Lysera looked at their joined hands. "The Senate has convened an emergency session," she said. "The data is out, all of it. The protests are massive. They are calling for the dissolution of the Stability Council. Valen is in a holding cell. Vance is singing like a bird to save his own skin. So it is over." Jace said, "We can go home." Lysera laughed, a brittle sound. "Home?" "Jace, look at the news feeds." She gestured to a screen on the wall. It showed chaos, riots in the streets, political pundits screaming at each other. Some were calling Lysera a hero. Others were calling her a witch who had seduced a human soldier to steal power. "The truth did not fix everything," Lysera said. "It just broke the lies. Now we have to live in the mess we made." Jace squeezed her hand. "We," he emphasized. "We have to live in it." Lysera looked up at him, her golden eyes filled with tears. "I am not a princess anymore. Jace, without the marks, I cannot claim the throne. The traditionalists will never accept me. I am just..." "Lysera," Jace smiled. It was the first genuine, unburdened smile he had smiled in 20 years. "Just Lysera," he repeated. "That is exactly who I signed up for." He leaned down and kissed her. It was soft, gentle, and full of promises. "I bought a pet," he whispered against her lips. "But I think I would like to keep the partner instead." Lysera laughed, sniffing back tears. "You are terrible at romance. I am working on it." The door to the medbay hissed open. They broke apart. Standing in the doorway was a delegation, a Vylari high priestess in flowing white robes and a human admiral in a dress uniform. They looked at the couple, the scarred veteran in a hospital gown and the faded princess. The admiral cleared his throat. "Mr. Jace, Lady Lysera." Jace stiffened, his military instinct kicking in. "Are we under arrest?" The high priestess stepped forward. She bowed. It was a deep, respectful bow. "No," she said. "The summit of realignment begins in 1 hour. The gathered representatives of both worlds are refusing to start without you." "Without us?" Lysera asked. "But I am. Look at me. I have lost the sign of the blood." The priestess shook her head. "You have not lost it, child. You gave it away to save a life. That is the oldest magic of all." The admiral nodded. "They do not want a ruler, ma'am. They want witnesses. They want the 2 people who stopped the war to show them how to build the peace." Jace looked at Lysera. She looked terrified. "I do not know how to be a symbol," she whispered to him. Jace took her hand again, threading his fingers through hers. "Fake it till you make it, princess," he murmured. "I'll watch your back." Lysra took a deep breath. She lifted her chin. The dignity was still there. Marks or no marks. "Very well," she said to the delegation. She looked at Jace, a spark of her old humor returning to her eyes. "But if they try to put a collar on either of us, we are stealing the ship again." Jace grinned. "Copy that." The screens in the great hall of the Orion Senate were 3 stories tall, and for the last 3 weeks they had shown nothing but the faces of the guilty. It was a spectacle of justice that spanned 2 star systems. In the human megacities, massive holographic billboards broadcast the proceedings to crowds huddled in the rain. On the Vailari homeworld, the crystalline data spires pulsed with the live feed, turning the city skylines into pillars of accusation. Regent Valen sat in a suppression field, his fine robes replaced by a gray prisoner's tunic. He looked small without his retinue, a petty tyrant stripped of his props. Next to him, on a split screen from a military tribunal on Earth, General Vance was sweating through his dress uniform, stammering about following orders and strategic necessities. They tried to contain the damage. The defense lawyers and government spin doctors spoke of a few bad apples, of rogue elements, of isolated corruption. They tried to paint the pet trade as a minor, unfortunate side effect of a necessary war. But the data Lysra had released was too vast and too granular to be spun. There were receipts for children sold by weight. There were video logs of admirals laughing at harvest festivals where sentient beings were paraded in chains. There were emails debating the cost-benefit analysis of prolonging a planetary siege versus simply buying the survivors at a discount. The public did not want apologies. They wanted blood. Or if not blood, they wanted a new world. Lysra stood in the antechamber of the summit hall, smoothing the front of her tunic. She was the rightful heir. The high priestess had confirmed it, and the DNA tests had verified it. But she was not the princess the traditionalists wanted. She had refused the ceremonial robes of the coronation, the heavy, stifling layers of gold and gauze that were meant to turn a queen into a statue. Instead, she had commissioned something new. She wore a long coat of midnight blue Vailari silk, embroidered with the silver star charts of her ancestors. But the cut was severe, militaristic. Beneath it, she wore heavy combat boots, almost identical to the ones Jace wore. And across her chest, instead of a royal sash of jewels, she wore a simple band of ballistic weave, a nod to the tactical gear that had kept her alive in the Undercity. It was a visual manifesto. It said, "I am of the blood, but I am also of the war." Jace stood beside her. He was tugging at the collar of his dress uniform. It was a dark blue affair with stiff epaulets, pinned with the medals he had once thrown in a drawer. He looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. "Stop fidgeting," Lysra said, not looking at him. "You look dashing." "I look like a recruitment poster," Jace grumbled. "This collar is choking me. I miss my jacket. It had pockets. I do not know what to do with my hands." "Hold mine," Lysra said. She held out her hand. Her fingers were long, pale violet, and steady. The bioluminescent markings on her skin were faint now, white traceries like old scars. But they still hummed with a soft, warm light when she was near him. Jace took her hand. His grip was rough, calloused, and grounding. "They are going to stare," Jace warned. The protocol droid gave me a 10-minute lecture on how inappropriate it is for a royal to make physical contact with a non-citizen in public. "Let them stare," Lysra said. "If they have a problem with it, I will remind them that the last time I followed protocol, I ended up in a cage. The great doors of the summit hall groaned open. A herald announced them, his voice booming through the chamber. Her Royal Highness, Lizra Valorian, and her companion, Sergeant Jace Kincaid. They walked in. The hall was a cavern of white stone and floating gravity platforms. Hundreds of delegates were arranged in a semicircle, human senators in gray suits, Vylari nobles in shimmering robes, military commanders from both sides. As Jace and Lizra walked down the central aisle, the silence was heavy. It was the silence of a room full of people who had been forced to rewrite their entire worldview in less than a month. Jace felt the eyes on him. He felt the judgment. To the Vylari nobles, he was a savage, a brute from a species that had bombed their cities. To the human generals, he was a traitor, a loose cannon who had aired their dirty laundry. He tightened his grip on Lysera's hand. He kept his head up, his eyes scanning the room for threats, old habits dying hard. Lysera did not scan. She projected. She walked with a stride that was too long for a courtier, a stride she had learned running through maintenance shafts. She looked every single delegate in the eye as she passed. They reached the central podium. Lysera took her seat, not on the high throne, but on a simple chair placed at the level of the floor. Jace stood behind her, at parade rest, his hand resting casually on the hilt of the ceremonial sword they had insisted he wear. The debate began. It was messy. The topic was the restructuring of the alliance, but the subtext was fear. The old guard was terrified of the new world Lysera represented. Lord Heron, a Vylari elder with elaborate gold head crests, stood up. "We acknowledge the bravery of the princess," Heron said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But we must address the optics. The monarchy is a symbol of purity, of stability. To have the heir openly cohabitating with a human, a soldier of the lower caste no less, is strategically unwise. It sends a message of disorder." General Vance's replacement, a stern woman named Admiral Joe, nodded in agreement. "We have similar concerns." Admiral Joe said, "The public is confused. They see a hero, yes, but they also see a relationship that defies social and biological norms. It is indecent." Jace's jaw tightened. He started to step forward, but Lysera raised a hand. She stood up. She did not shout. She spoke with a quiet, lethal precision. "Indecent," Lysera repeated, tasting the word. She looked at Lord Heron. "You speak of purity, my lord, yet I saw your signature on a requisition form for 3 Vylari bondservants last year. You kept them in your private estate. You called them staff. The records show they were wearing suppression collars." "Was that pure?" Heron sputtered, his crests flushing dark red. That was a different matter. Domestic service is a tradition." Lysera turned to Admiral Joe. "And you, Admiral, you call my relationship indecent. Yet for 10 years, your government turned a blind eye to the brothels on the orbital stations where sentients were forced to service your troops. You called it morale boosting. You called it a necessary evil." She stepped out from behind the podium, walking toward the center of the floor. "You were willing to watch us be sold," Lysera said, her voice rising. "You were willing to watch us be beaten, chained, and used. You did not call that indecent. You called it commerce. You called it politics." She reached back and grabbed Jace's hand, pulling him forward to stand beside her. "But this..." She held his hand up, their fingers interlaced, contrasting skins against each other. 2 adults, standing together by choice. 2 people who saved each other's lives and decided to face the dark together. This is what you find obscene. She looked around the room, her golden eyes burning. The obscenity is not our love, she declared. The obscenity is that you were so comfortable with our slavery that you forgot what freedom looks like. She dropped Jace's hand, but stayed close to him. If you want a symbol of purity, look elsewhere. I am not pure. I am a survivor, and I will not hide the man who helped me survive. If that is too messy for this council, then you can find another heir. But I suspect the people outside these walls might prefer the mess to your lies. She sat down. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the back of the room, a young human aide started to clap. Then a Vylari junior officer joined in. The applause spread, tentative at first, then rolling through the hall like thunder, drowning out the sputtering protests of the old men. That night, the reception was a suffocating affair of crystal flutes and forced smiles. Lysera was surrounded by diplomats trying to pivot, trying to align themselves with the new power. She signaled Jace with a subtle tilt of her head. It was a code they had developed. Get me out of here. They slipped away through a service corridor, dodging a waiter and a drone camera. They ended up on a private balcony on the highest spire of the Senate Tower. The air was cool and smelled of the alien sea that surrounded the capital city. 3 moons hung in the sky, one large and silver, 2 small and red, casting a complex, shifting light over the waves far below. Lysera leaned against the railing, exhaling a long, shuddering breath. She pulled the high collar of her coat open, letting the wind hit her skin. I hate them, she said quietly. Jace stood beside her, leaning his back against the stone, watching the door. You handled them well, he said. You gutted them. It was impressive. I feel like I am in another cage. Jace, she confessed, they watch everything. How I stand, how I eat, how I look at you. If I smile too much, I am frivolous. If I do not smile enough, I am traumatized. I am still performing. Jace reached out and touched her shoulder. His hand was warm through the silk. You are not performing for me, he said. Lysera turned to face him. The moonlight washed out the white scars of her lost markings, making her look ghostly. No, she said. Never for you. She stepped closer, invading his personal space in that way that used to terrify him and now felt like the only safe place in the world. Are you okay? She asked. You were quiet today. I am worried, Jace admitted. He looked down at his hands. The hands that had killed men, the hands that had broken Rask's wrist. About what? About being the thing that drags you down, Jace said. I am not a diplomat, Lysera. I am a grunt with a history of violence and a head full of bad wiring. Today it was speeches. Tomorrow, someone might push too hard. I might hurt someone. I do not want to be the reason your reign fails. Lysera reached up and took his face in her hands. Jace, look at me. He met her eyes. They were liquid gold, deep and unblinking. You are not my liability, she said fiercely. You are my anchor. When I was in that room, listening to them justify their cruelty, I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn the building down. But I felt your hand. I felt you standing there. And I remembered that kindness exists, that courage exists. She ran her thumbs over his cheekbones. You think you are broken because you have a temper? Because you have nightmares? Jace, look at what we survived. We are both jagged edges. That is how we fit together. She pulled him down. Kiss me, she whispered, not for the cameras, just for us. He kissed her. It was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled collision of the warship. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was a conversation without words. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her flush against him. Her arms went around his neck, her fingers tangling in the short hair at the nape of his neck. They stood there for a long time, exploring the geography of each other with a reverence that felt holy. Jace learned the curve of her spine, the heat of her skin, the way her breath hitched when he brushed his lips against the sensitive hollow of her throat. Lysera learned the strength in his shoulders, the surprising gentleness of his touch, the way he trembled slightly when she held him close, as if he still couldn't believe he was allowed to have this. It was an intimacy that went deeper than skin. It was the feeling of safety, the feeling of being known, fully and terrifyingly known, and being loved anyway. They broke apart, breathless, resting their foreheads together, the 3 moons reflected in their eyes. "I want to leave," Lysera whispered. "Leave the reception, leave the city," she said. "Leave the politics. I do not want to be a queen. Jace, I never did. I want to build something." "What kind of something?" Jace asked. "A place where no one is property," she said, looking out at the horizon. "A place for the ones who do not fit, the ex-soldiers who cannot sleep, the pets who forgot their names. A sanctuary." Jace smiled. He could see it. A quiet moon. Real air. Work that meant something. "I think I know a few people who would help," Jace said. Cade had some contacts in the Outer Rim. Safe worlds. Lysera smiled back. It was a real smile, bright and mischievous. "We could run away," she said. "Just you, me, and a few thousand refugees." "Sounds like a plan," Jace said. "But I am not wearing this dress uniform." Deal. Time skip. 8 months later. The moon of Sanctuary was a lush green world orbiting a gas giant in the neutral zone. It had no strategic value, no rare minerals, and no military bases. It was perfect. The settlement was a sprawling collection of modular habitats and terraformed gardens. It was noisy, chaotic, and alive. Jace stood in the center of the training yard, wiping sweat from his forehead. He was wearing his old leather jacket, the sleeves rolled up, and cargo pants covered in mud. Around him, a group of children, human, Vylari, and 3 other species were running an obstacle course. They were laughing, shouting, and tripping over each other. "Keep your center of gravity low," Jace called out, "and stop pulling each other's tails." That is a fowl, a young Vylari boy, who had been rescued from a labor camp 2 weeks ago, stopped and looked at Jace. "Sergeant Jace, can we take a break? We are hungry." Jace checked his chrono. "Fine. 10 minutes. Go bother the kitchen droids." The kids cheered and scattered. Jace walked over to the fence, where a familiar figure was leaning, watching him with amusement. Lysera was wearing a loose tunic and trousers, her hair tied back in a messy braid. She looked tired, but happy. Her skin had regained a healthy sheen, though the royal marks remained white scars. "You are soft on them," she teased. "General Vance would be disappointed. If General Vance were here." "I would use him as a punching bag," Jace said, taking the water bottle she offered. "How was the council meeting?" "Productive," she said. "The joint government finally approved the funding for the trauma center. And we have 3 new transport ships arriving tomorrow with supplies." "That is good," Jace said. "We are going to need more beds." A group of teenagers walked past carrying crates of fruit. One of them, a human girl with a cybernetic arm, waved. "Hey, princess, hey, guard dog." Lysera laughed. "I told you that nickname would stick," Jace sighed. "I barked one time. It was to scare a predatory bird away from the nursery." "You barked at a diplomat," Lysera corrected. "He was being aggressive." Jace defended, and it worked. He stopped talking. Lysera shook her head, grinning. "You are impossible." They walked together toward the main complex. The settlement was buzzing with activity. In the rehabilitation wing, therapists were working with former pets, helping them relearn language and autonomy. In the workshops, veterans from both sides of the war were teaching engineering and carpentry, their old animosities buried under the need to build a roof that didn't leak. It wasn't paradise. There were fights. There were nightmares. Some nights, the screaming from the dormitories was heartbreaking. But the next morning, there was always breakfast, and work, and someone to listen. Jace and Lysera had built a house on a hill overlooking the settlement. It was simple, made of local timber and stone, no gold, no cages. That evening they stood on the deck, watching the twin suns set. The sky was a riot of orange and purple. Jace leaned against the railing, watching the lights of the settlement flicker on below. He felt a peace he hadn't known was possible. It wasn't the absence of pain. The memories of the war were still there, but the presence of purpose. Lysera moved to stand beside him. She slipped her arm through his. "Jace," she said softly. "Yeah? Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Regret what? Walking into that alley? Buying me? Losing your pension? Becoming a fugitive?" She looked up at him, her expression serious. "You could be sitting on a beach somewhere with a synthetic dog and a bottle of whiskey. You could have had a quiet life." Jace looked at her. He looked at the white scars on her face, the fierce intelligence in her eyes, the way her hand rested comfortably in the crook of his arm. He thought about the apartment in New Elysium, the silence, the gray walls, the slow, suffocating weight of being alone. "I went out that day expecting a pet," Jace said quietly. "I wanted something small, something that wouldn't ask questions, something to just fill the silence." He turned to face her. "Instead, I found the loudest, bravest, most infuriating princess in the galaxy." Lysera swatted his arm. "Infuriating?" "Absolutely," Jace said, grinning. "You stole my shirt. You criticized my coffee. You dragged me into a revolution." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You taught me how to live again. Lysera, I don't regret a second of it. Not the danger. Not the fear. Not even the part where you electrocuted me with your feelings." Lysera rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "You are getting sappy in your old age." "Sergeant?" "Maybe," Jace said. "Or maybe I just finally have something worth being sappy about." She laughed, a bright, clear sound that rang out in the twilight. "Shut up and kiss me," she said. He obliged. They kissed under a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. Stars that looked down on a world where cages were being turned into garden fences, and where two broken people had built a home out of the pieces. Epilogue. The transport ship touched down on the landing pad with a hiss of hydraulics. The ramp lowered. A young Villari girl stepped out. She couldn't have been more than 10. She was thin, dirty, and trembling. She wore a ragged tunic and a heavy metal collar around her neck. She looked around with wide, terrified eyes. She saw the strange buildings, the people moving freely, the open sky. She flinched as a maintenance drone buzzed past. She backed away, looking for a corner to hide in. Then she saw them. A tall human man with a limp and a kind face, and a Villari woman with scars that glowed faintly in the dusk. They walked toward her. They did not run. They did not shout. They moved with a slow, deliberate gentleness. The man knelt down on one knee, bringing himself to her eye level. The woman stood beside him, her hands open and empty. The girl froze, waiting for the order, waiting for the shock. The woman spoke first. "Hello," she said softly. "You are safe here." The girl touched the collar at her throat. I am property," she whispered. "No," the man said. His voice was rough, like gravel, but warm. Not anymore. He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a remote. He pulled out a small laser cutter. He held it out, showing it to her. "My name is Jace," he said. "And this is Lysera. We used to wear chains too." The girl looked at the tool. She looked at Lysera's scars. She looked at Jace's eyes. "Can you take it off?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Jace smiled. It was the smile of a man who had found his mission. "We can," he said. Lysera knelt down beside him. She reached out and took the girl's hand. And after that, she said, "We can help you figure out who you want to be when you are free." The girl took a step forward. Jace turned on the cutter. The sparks flew, bright and hot against the coming night, signaling the end of one story and the beginning of another.